All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And greetings all.
Oh, he's back, baby.
You
He's
better
back.
believe it, bitches. My S is here. You're damn straight. You cannot give me enough of it. I love it. I drink it in. People say, Mark, how can you possibly respond to what is clearly recorded applause? I say, I don't know, but I love it. I absolutely adore it. Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. It's overwhelming, the sense of affection that I get from the recorded audience. Thank you.
Hey,
yes.
Which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
I get more affection from the recorded audience than I do from my live colleagues.
What?
They are paid to be here, and they don't give me the kind of love that I get from my recorded audience.
Come on.
Yeah, I get a chit.
As a complainer, I tell you you're missed. I say, welcome back. I give you a big, he's back, everybody. And still,
it's boilerplate. It's boilerplate.
Seriously.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's not sincere, but
Never
Kim, how are you?
I'm just
Never
happy.
Yeah.
Wow, did you come on a great day if you're new here? Because we've got it all for you. Specifically, we will talk about major ruling in Minnesota. You understand, in the court there was an effort to bump Donald Trump from the ballot based on the 14th Amendment.
Sayonara, sucker.
Yeah. That case was ruled upon, and we'll have David Katz in hour 2 to dissect a little bit of that. Essentially, just to bottom line it, and this is truly just bottom lining it because I think the devil is in a little bit of the details, but Trump will remain on the ballot in Minnesota, according to the judge's ruling. So that'll be one of the things we talk about with David Katz, but obviously it's a big week for the Trumps in court in New York. We'll speak with David Katz about that. David, the former federal prosecutor, now works the defense side of the table, joins us in hour 2. In this first hour, Belinda, who is normally in the second hour with The Planet Stupid, is nice enough to, go airborne with us early, and she'll be doing It's the Planet Stupid bottom of this hour after Kim's news.
It's my fault. I did that.
That's to Kim. You can do no wrong.
Kim, how are you?
I double booked, and Belinda was nice enough to help me out. So,
well, that's good. All right. Well, it happens. I mean, it does happen. So not to worry.
I've told you, it's never easy being in this business.
It's not. It's the great thing, the thing that she double booked, Kim did, is George Shlatter. Conversation with George Shlatter. If the name means vaguely something to you, it's probably because he was behind one of the biggest entertainment franchises in the history of a changing television landscape. It was called Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. And Laugh-In was a variety show that came up right in the early days of the 70s, during Vietnam, I think also late 60s. I have to look at the dates. Albert, you can...
I was wrong, period.
Yeah, I might have been wrong about the 70s. It could have been late 60s to definitely extended into the 70s.
Yeah.
But it was a kind of a changing time in America, and more to the point, it was a very funny show. There were only 3 networks, and so the world watched it. And it broke careers. I mean, it really busted open careers.
Is that where Goldie Hawn started?
Exactly. So you had a big, you had this adorable Goldie Hawn, Ruth Buzzy, Artie Johnson. Is that his name? Yeah. There were all of these kind of character actors and comedians who found a voice there on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. The President of the United States, Richard Nixon at the time, actually went on the show with a recorded bit. Anyway, we'll talk to George Shlatter about how that all happened. He has a new book out, which is why he's kind of making the rounds, I think, reminiscing. but we'll get to that as well. That'll be in hour 2.
We have a birthday.
What?
It's Grady's birthday in the chat. Grady,
Wow.
happy birthday to you. Yeah.
Wow, Grady, Grady Sheriff?
There's a reason that this place is fun.
Sheriff
Not
Grady?
Sheriff, not Sheriff Grady.
Oh.
Our Grady in the chat. Yeah.
Grady in the chat, happy birthday, sir. Love our Grady. Yeah.
What he's got going here is a situation.
That's the other Grady, and it is a birthday situation.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yes, Tom is right. Nixon said, "Sock it to me." Yeah. We'll ask him about that. And Henry Gibson, that's right. Yeah. Those are all laugh-in references. So, yeah. So George will be here in the second hour. Now, because we live out loud on this show, that is to say, I tell you everything. I have conversations with people on the show like Albert and Kim. If we have a problem, we talk about it and kind of hash it out a lot of the time here on the air. One of the reasons for that is Kim does a show before this, then Kim does a show after this. So if I want to talk to Kim, I pretty much have to tell her whatever I got to tell her on the air.
What have I done?
No, this is not about you, amazingly, because
Kim, how are you?
I thought you did a great job while I was away. So let me finish.
Can you let him finish, sir?
I did a great job of changing the show. No, I.
Oh my God!
I thought you were great. I really did. No, that's a full. I was only kidding. No, the thing I wanted to ask was, Albert, George Shlatter, because it is hour 2. He's an older man. He may not be as tech savvy, but he might be more tech savvy than I know.
Sure.
Will there be any issue getting him on, Albert? Does he have all the things? Have you been party to any communications, or Kim, or have you? Is he clear on how to reach us, to hit the link? And
I sent the show link with the instructions. He has one of these PR people, because we live out loud, that won't let me have his email address. He wants to email the link to his client, to George. So I'm assuming that because it's going through a PR agency, that he has help. And that there's someone that will be assisting him to connect to all his interviews today.
Okay, good. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Albert, thank you very much for that. That was
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. The chat, which has to be watched by Albert and Kim because I'm busy being charming and charismatic as host, is celebrating Grady and also mentioning Rowan and Martin's laugh-in. And there's a question about my parents. I just was back east to see mom and dad. Ren asks, please update us on your folks. That's very kind of you, first of all, to ask. And I'll just take 20 seconds to say they're doing well in the sense that they are 93 and they really, hit stride in a certain way. As you know, we have certain health considerations with my father, particularly, but at 93, you never know if health consideration is going to hit anybody in the house,
Yeah.
So I was there looking both at ways to spend time with them and enjoy and they're really just terrific people. I enjoyed so much. And also look for other places they might live besides the house that I grew up in that might be able to attend to their changing needs. And so that's really why I was there. It was kind of like the assisted living tour that I was on. So it's cool. I got to be honest. A lot of those places, I could live there pretty nicely. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
everything's taken care of for you. All you have to do is just, be you.
Very cruise shippy, country clubby, some of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Others, not so much. Like some of them are kind of an urban environment, which I think actually my parents would like. But, sometimes you're limited by availability and all the rest. So they may end up in a less urban environment. But that's what we're kind of looking at. When I say urban, like, you can walk out the door and you can walk to a restaurant. I like that. That's the world I grew up in. And I think that's what my parents would like, particularly my mother. But, you make decisions based on availability and that sort of thing. So
that's
anyway.
hard, and it's hard to know which ones are the good ones.
Yeah, they're going to visit, and, obviously they're going to visit, and they're going to make a decision. So,
regarding Laugh-In, Hane says, I remember the phrase, very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
My friends and I used it all the time. It was the late 60s because I was an au pair from Denmark in Westport, Connecticut. Cool.
Hane is a au pair all grown up.
Yeah.
Those Danish au pairs that came over here. Yeah. Hannah's regular KGO listener moved over to YouTube with us. And she's right. That very interesting was like the, Artie Johnson in a Nazi helmet. It was kind of weird. I think wasn't he like with a cigarette? And that's my recollection of it.
I mean, it was the 60s, 70s, what have you.
Right.
Oh, Macaulay, I'm so sorry to hear this. Just lost my mother last week at 99. Now the home needs to be sold after having it in the family since 1965.
Now, these are really, really difficult transitions.
They're hard issues.
I'm so
and it's
sorry to hear that.
If your parents move into an assisted care place, like then what happens to the house you grew up in,
Yeah. I should have them on. Thank you, Jim. By the way, that is sad. So sorry that the passing of your mom.
Yeah, me too.
Jim says if they feel up to it, you should have them make a brief appearance, Mark, your mom and dad. I used to love their visits on Station X. Yeah, I used to have them on KGO all the time. I might do that. Yeah, might do that. So, yeah, this is all laugh-in stuff. Thank you, Rod. All right, so, Albert, let me just understand this. I have no guest till the bottom of the hour, till after Kim's news, right?
Yeah, Belinda at the bottom, after the news.
Okay, good. All right, let's get started.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Last night was the GOP debate. It was, I thought Kim actually said it well when she said it was sort of meh. I mean, It was all show and no go. There was a lot of, I thought, hawkish talk about Middle East. There were simple solutions suggested to nuanced, complicated problems. You had this Vivek Ramaswamy just going off the chain with, he attacked the moderator at one point, saying you and the media push the Russia lie and all this kind of thing. And
he's a piece of work, man.
He puts the T in trouble, man. That guy is trouble. But, he's like, I would have said he's, too slick for elected office. He seems like such a slickster, except for the fact that Trump was able to, come across with the slickster stuff that people seem to lap up. So, Albert, you have some highlights from last night's GOP debate. And, of course, the big thing is that you're missing the candidate that leads the field. Donald Trump isn't even on the stage. And I don't blame him. I don't blame Trump for not being there. You can only lose. So you have everybody after you. Why not just skip it? You don't need it. So here is the GOP debate, some highlights minus the squad leader who was Trump.
Begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than where we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
Everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now.
We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It is a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. Since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party.
As president of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel.
Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border. And then I'll tell him as president of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control.
Right. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic.
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to.
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer.
So this is what I will tell you.
We're driving Russia into China's hands because of these foolish policies.
TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country, and they're doing it intentionally.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it.
As much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that. There's some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided.
We need a 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit.
But don't make the American people think that you're going to push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
I mean, what's so wild about, I'll take the last thing first. What's so wild to me about that entire position where you start pushing for a federal 15-week ban on abortion rights, it doesn't all matter really whether it's 15 weeks, 25 weeks, or not at all. You now have the federal government. You've just said it, Tim Scott. You want the federal government involved in a woman's decision that she makes with her doctor. This is the party of personal choice. You don't want the federal government involved when you have to make a decision about the vaccine. You don't have the federal government involved when you have to make a decision of any sort when it comes to owning a gun. But you want the federal government to take charge of women's reproductive systems and be involved in this intimate conversation between women and their doctors. It's you can't square that circle, right? Tim Scott is just full of it. Now, Tim Scott is not relevant. He's on the stage. Most of them aren't relevant, except they do two things, I'd say. They reflect the zeitgeist of the GOP. Because remember, they're raising money on a lot of what they're saying. They're high-profile figures within the GOP world and the atmosphere of the GOP, even though they're not real contenders for the top office because of Trump's dominance. So they give you some reflection, I think, on that. And then ultimately, one of these people may end up on the ticket with Trump, you know. I mean, Trump's floated that he wants Tucker Carlson to run with him. And, you know, Tucker Carlson, who in private communications indicated that Trump is a joke, that Trump is a pain in the ass. These are things that were
going to be Trump Carlson 2024. What?
Yeah. I mean, you know, again, I'm sure there are ways to talk your way out of that and what you wrote, but there's that. On as I mentioned to you, the Middle East, they're all just hawks. I mean, it's not even worth commenting on it. That was just an absolute nod to the hard right, you know. I'd say finish the job. I say BB, you know, I'd tell him BB, like he mentions
like
BB.
Buddies?
Right. I mean, I get it. Yeah, like Vicky said.
They play golf together every Sunday.
Yeah, first name BB, exactly. It's sort of like, come on.
Vilma says, I want to know what criteria would Ramaswamy use to identify terrorists that he would smoke on our southern border? That was outrageous when he said that.
He said, I'd smoke the terrorists. This is what I'd tell them this morning, and then I'd smoke them. Yeah, it's utterly absurd. But that kind of tough talk, that kind of machismo talk, it is the coin of the realm on the GOP side. So there is that. This from Phineas. Mark, all these politicians are clueless. They will say anything to get elected and know crap about the issues and will do the opposite of what they promised during a debate or during their campaign stump. I think that's almost exactly right. Certainly, it's true that they'll say anything to get elected. And most of them certainly don't appreciate the nuance of all of these issues. You know, I'm someone who's visited with you on energy. Now, it wasn't in those clips, but they talked about energy and oil exploration and the price of gas because they know that that does affect Americans. And the first thing they went for is I'd okay the pipeline. I'd begin drilling right away on day one. That was their big thing. Day one is going to be an awfully busy day since everything they want to do is going to be done on day one. But I mean that's got to be a montage somewhere. On day one I'm going to do this. But anyway, as I've mentioned to you before, you can drill all you want. It's not going to affect prices at the pump. It's not. So this idea, I'd release all of the oil restrictions and restrictions on drilling. It was said by multiple candidates on stage last night. It's not going to affect the price of oil. And the idea somehow that the futures market is affected by it, that's just not true. They did a lot of stuff and floated a lot of BS. That was just the kind of typical BS that they've been slinging on that side of the aisle for a long time. It's not working anymore. And if you need to know it's not working anymore, look at the results in Virginia. Look at the results in Ohio. You are a party that is out of step with America. America doesn't want the same crap that you've been slinging, and you just slinged it again last night. I get it. New candidates, new neckties. Doesn't matter. People in large numbers turned out to repudiate the notion that you would outlaw a woman's right to an abortion in Ohio. And the voters will continue to repudiate your ridiculous medieval positions. You unleashed a horror with the Supreme Court. It's one that we will have to live with for years.
Yeah.
But to the extent that you turn it back to the states will repudiate that which you have wrought. And I'm astounded by the power of this memo that the GOP continues to get. And yet they point to Ronna McDaniel and all they say, we've got to check. Guys, it's what you are saying that people have a problem with. It's what you are doing that people have a problem with. It's the strategy here is not some complicated 3D chess. It's that you've come out against women's reproductive rights. You've loaded the Supreme Court with these holy rollers and hard right, business friendly, to be polite about it, corporate tools. And then, not to mention that the Supreme Court and your justices are corrupt. It's an outrage that it should be an outrage to so many GOPers that they still don't get that memo. They still don't get that memo. So when I look at these guys on stage last night, I just think they missed the point. They really did. Who had a good night? I guess Nikki Haley, because she clapped back at Vivek. Is that what people are saying? Kim, is that kind of the conventional wisdom?
I don't know if I saw any word of if somebody was the official winner of the debate. Sometimes they'll look at how many minutes you manage to speak. And so if you manage to take more minutes than anyone else, regardless of what you said, then you're seen as the winner of the debate. I don't think anybody won. They all look like a bunch of bozos.
The Republican Party's in trouble. It keeps losing elections across the country. It has done two things since 2020, each of which could keep a political party out of power for decades. It stripped women of fundamental rights and led a party-wide conspiracy to overturn an election and American democracy. This is from Simon Rosenberg is this guy. I don't even, to be honest, I just liked his Substack years ago, I think. And I say years ago, probably like a couple of years ago. And I thought his a few paragraphs on here are just so right on. I mean, it's just incredible. This political moment is just so clear to me. And yet, even as we deal with real challenges in the world and in this country, GOP just doesn't seem to get it. So now that we're coming off of what I think is, as I've suggested, another message sent in Ohio and Virginia, you know, if you're in the Republican Party, you gotta get your act together. You really need I think you need a new plan. You need to really have Commissioner, this reminds me of a losing football team where you need to, fire everybody and dismantle it, get a new quarterback, and, you need a ground up rebuilding year.
Yeah, the Raiders just did that last week. They won. So maybe that's what they need. Yeah.
Look, instead of that happening, what do you see on the GOP side? You see them with this new speaker who is alt-right. He is all about these alt-right positions. I mean, he's repeatedly fought for a national abortion ban. This is the new Speaker of the House, okay, with no exceptions for rape or incest. Yeah. He is one of the most extreme right political figures, but because nobody knew his name, he kind of snuck in, and people were just weary of the process. And now, this same party that elected this guy keeps trying to shut the government down. You're going to have another government shutdown November 17th. So all I'm trying to say is, I mean, these guys, not to mention blockading appointments for the military. I mean, you've seen a degradation of military readiness based on what every calculation would seem to show. I'm talking about from officials within the Pentagon because of Republican obstructionism. So this is a real problem for the Republican Party. And if you're a well-meaning Republican, if you're like an old school Republican or you fancy yourself some, Mark, I believe in less government and less regulation and I'm a whatever. Okay. But the one thing they've done is they've given you your tax cuts, but the debt was run up insanely under Donald Trump. There was certainly no fiscal restraint. And that was pointed to last night by Nikki Haley and I think one other on stage. I can't recall who. But, you'll have to own that at some point. And the point may be now. So this idea that you're the party of fiscal restraint is just laughable. It's a joke. I mean, look at what happened under George Bush. He spent like crazy, started with a surplus, refunded the surplus. Everybody got like checks for $600 and change. And then he runs up the debt, builds the government bigger than ever before with the Department of Homeland Security, uses 9/11 as a jumping off point to then start something both in Afghanistan and Iraq. In Iraq, that had nothing to do with 9/11. He pours tons of money, tons of American lives, and blows away hundreds of thousands of civilians. That is your old school Republican Party. That's George Bush. How far back do you want to go? Reagan, he also grew government. All I'm trying to say is they need some kind of true reboot, hard reboot, the GOP, because they are on the wrong trail and Americans are starting to realize it. Even last night, and then I'll move on, I promise, but even last night during the debate, when I heard them talking about a woman's reproductive rights, okay, they talked about the fact that even Nikki Haley said, well, in some states they've passed these abortion bans, and in other states, I'm not crazy about it, but they've opposed them and they've been able to get it into their state constitution. Yeah, the places where they passed the abortion bans were trigger laws. They were triggered by the decision at the Supreme Court level. The people didn't vote for that. You can't win a legit referendum on women's abortion rights on taking them away. If you put it on the ballot, the taking away of women's right to choose, if you put it on the ballot as a referendum, it will lose every single time. Women do not want their rights taken away, and they shouldn't get them. It shouldn't even be an issue. Yep. But so when they talk about, well, in some states they've done it. No, in the states where that's happened, these legislators, largely men, they vote. Or to be fair, I mean, there are women who come out of the hard right as well, and they are limiting a women's reproductive rights in those states. But every state there's been a referendum, women will come to the polls and they will stand up for their own rights. And I think you're going to see that in the general election as well. I mean, I'm a pessimist. I think the worst of people, and generally I am right. People continue to do the most awful things. But wow, I am so encouraged by the way women have taken control. And I told you years ago on KGO, I'm ready for women to run the place. And that's not to look, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene and, Lauren Boebert and that Carrie Lake. They're crazy women too.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't mean to be too gender biased, but boy, men have really, they're starting to buy their own BS. And again, on the reproductive rights thing, I just think it's a non-starter. And the GOP is going to start to own this. And they're going to own it in more and more places, and it's going to weigh them down.
I was seeing this T-shirt. It said, "The post-Roe generation votes."
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely right.
Exactly.
Now that younger women realize that this right isn't guaranteed, and they realize their choices are being taken away and their health is at risk, 100%. You think that's okay? We'll show you at the ballot box.
And as I've told you, I mean, I don't know to what extent. I know everything is always spun in this political environment, but I don't know to what extent you can spin trying to shut the government down, and holding the government hostage to extreme right-wing views, Anyway, that's a big chunk of politics here at the beginning, but I just thought, having not been here the last couple of days and having seen the Republican quote debate. Before Kim's News, Trump had his own stump speech going. Albert, do you have that? The Trump stuff? He was kind of counter-programming. He said, tens of thousands of people. The numbers don't reflect that tens of thousands of people showed up. But do you have it, Albert? Or
I do.
Let's just run it real quick, please. Thank you.
Somebody said, one of the dumber ones, he doesn't have the courage to stand up. Well, listen, I'm standing in front of tens of thousands of people right now, and it's on television. That's a
your supporters.
Debate. It's time for the Republican establishment to stop wasting time and resources trying to push weak and ineffective rhinos and never-Trumpers that nobody wants and nobody's going to vote for. I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration, and we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. And unlike Ron DeSanctimonious, I will always protect Social Security and Medicare. In times like these, you can't afford to have a president who wants to be politically correct. We have to do things properly. We cannot have an administration that takes foreign policy advice from Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. Can't do that. Can't do that. I kept America safe. I kept Israel safe. I kept Ukraine safe. And I kept the world safe. Israel, Ukraine would have never happened under the Trump administration.
He ends it, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to give you a flavor for, Trump's playing the hits, right? So the reality is Donald Trump, and I think it was in the comments, Randy's comment, unfortunately, Trump still appears to have a chance to win in 2024. Yeah, I mean, that's because of the broken system that we have. If we didn't have the Electoral College, we wouldn't even have that comment from Randy. The reality is Donald Trump cannot win a popular vote election in America. Cannot do it. I'd suggest now that no Republican could win it. No Republican can win a popular vote election in America. But that's not how we do it in America. The fix is in. And the Electoral College is what gives Donald Trump and the GOP a chance to win presidential elections. Otherwise, they could not win, arguably, another election in America. Without gerrymandering, they couldn't win, the GOP, many of the seats in Congress that they now hold. And I understand gerrymandering is done by both parties, but it's done far more extremely and far more severely by the Republicans than the Democrats. Without this ridiculous system, you wouldn't be able to hold up the budget in the way you now can hold it up, with a handful of extremists holding up the U.S. government. So it's the system we have, but let's not pretend it's the best system on earth. We're the best country. Oh, my goodness. Democracy, democracy. Please. The people's voice is snuffed out by the process that we have in this country. So don't mean to be too heavy, just wanting to give you a couple of thoughts. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
We do have Belinda standing by. I also have Kim standing by. Albert, do you want to do a news capsule and then Belinda?
Yes.
Okay. So news capsule, and then It's the Planet, Stupid. Belinda's been nice enough to push her regular segment, which normally on Thursdays is in the second hour, to the first hour. And now we are taking advantage of her generosity by making her wait even longer, which is...
Albert, thank you.
Yes, I blame Albert. Right.
Very quick.
Yeah. So news capsule, smash the like button if you would,
Smash
please.
it with your
It
iron
helps
rod.
us in the YouTube universe to get a thumbs up. Kim's news and then Belinda. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards. The White House is calling Israel's agreement to daily 4-hour pauses in fighting in Gaza against Hamas a very significant step. The pauses will allow for more humanitarian aid to get to civilians. The White House also says these pauses will allow civilians in northern Gaza to head south to safer areas. In the Los Angeles area last night, they had fights breaking out in the street outside the Los Angeles Museum of Tolerance. That is where Wonder Woman actress Gal Gadot organized a screening of footage from Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. Video from last night shows several people being pepper sprayed. Gadot served in the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, an official with Israel Defense Forces, and Hollywood executives were among the 200 people in attendance there. But yeah, riots outside of it. Man, tempers flaring. The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote in favor to issue subpoenas for Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo. There they both are. Good old Harlan, good old Leonard.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the subpoenas are in connection with the Supreme Court ethics probe. Conservative justices are being accused of accepting hospitality and travel from Crow and others without properly disclosing it.
Well, I mean, Leonard Leo, we're living in a Leonard Leo world. That guy you're seeing right now on screen. He runs the Federalist Society, had just over $1 billion in the last year. I think it's $1.5 billion contributed to that organization. That is your Supreme Court. Those are your extreme justices through the federal judiciary. You can thank that guy right there who's on screen.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, look at that cute smile. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is introducing a resolution that calls for impeaching Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Greene is accusing Alejandro Mayorkas of high crimes and misdemeanors related to the U.S. southern border. The House has 2 legislative days to vote on this resolution.
Their envy, wonton killing. I don't know what a wonton killing is.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look that one up.
All right. Yeah.
In the San Francisco area, the trial begins today on for the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, the man accused of attacking him. He goes to trial today. Jurors will learn if Pelosi will take the stand when both sides give opening statements. Paul Pelosi is likely to testify about how he was woken up by a man breaking into their house last year and struck with a hammer. The suspect confessed shortly afterward, admitting he was looking for Speaker Pelosi, who was actually in Washington, D.C. at the time of that attack. A handful of Bay Area cities getting more than $60 million in state housing funds to address the housing crisis in the Golden State. Governor Gavin Newsom's office saying this week the funding is coming from the second round of an almost $157 million Home Key Round 3 grant. Officials in Connecticut are calling a custodian's actions courageous after he stopped an armed man. The custodian was heading into the Lincoln Bassett Community School in New Haven when he noticed a man with a gun having a mental crisis. No injuries reported. He was able to safely de-escalate that situation until police arrived. Thank God.
Yeah.
This report sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards. When you say smash it with your iron rod,
Smash it with your iron rod.
you get 10% off at Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. Simply call Rich at 925-699-4576. Say smash it with your iron rod, and you get your 10% off.
With your
Okay,
iron
we got
rod.
it. We got it.
And that includes all the wine they sell, including the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red, my own personal favorite.
A fine choice, Kim.
Why are you yelling?
All the
Yeah.
events they have there, 10% off across the board. And thanks to the Tenuta Vineyards folks, Rich and Nancy, for always supporting the show.
They
I'm
are
Kim
great
McAllister.
supporters. Thank you, Kim. Yes.
This
Go
is
ahead.
the Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
You are a cover-up artist and you are a liar.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire.
You cannot say you love your country.
Supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way.
I love it. I love it. I can't get enough of it. You know it. It's our big show for Thursday. If you're joining us from anywhere, we love having you in the mix. We read your comments always, even in after-hour trading. If you're watching in replay, many people, most people I would imagine, I could even say, watch the show after it's broadcast live. We're on for 2 hours every day live. In the Pacific time zone, it's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So you do the arithmetic for wherever you live. It's really great to have all the people comment live, but also many of the comments after hours. In fact, I got a couple that I'd like to get to later, and if not today, I'll get to them in the first part of this show tomorrow about various issues and various thoughts, and it's my pleasure to all comers, as critical or as insightful as many are. I'd love to share them with the audience. So if you want to do that, you just jump right into the chat, or you can add your comment after hours. Let me put my credibility glasses on as I introduce a segment that we love and are so proud of, and it's our chance to show you that we try to follow what's going on the planet. We're a planet in crisis, as you know. Sometimes you can lose it in all the other crises, but we talk about the planet in a segment we do on Thursdays called It's the Planet, Stupid.
The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid. No. It's the planet stupid.
Our guide for It's the Planet Stupid's Belinda Waymouth, the eco-journalist. Hello, Belinda.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, and I'm interested in some of the legal efforts to call out the fossil fuel industry for some of the stuff they are doing. Can you, I don't know where you want to start, but I saw that among the things that you've been following is just that.
Yeah. Kim and I thought this would be a really important thing to discuss today. And I think it's, obviously we have to use every tool that we have. And the fact is, to go up against the fossil fuel industry legally, this is vital because they've caused all this damage And who's footing the bill? Well, it's local municipalities and governments, which means us, the taxpayer. We are paying. We have higher insurance premiums. And then, we're the ones who are footing the bill for repairing damaged infrastructure. And, we're just at the, sort of the beginning. I mean, not really the beginning, because obviously this has been going on for years. But there's way, way more damage that's coming. And so I think the fact that governments are taking big oil to court is really important. And there's this nonprofit, an organization called Center for Climate Integrity. And they released a report a couple of months ago talking about what climate change is going to cost the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a big fossil fuel producing state. But how much is it going, how much is the damage going to cost them? And, why they're doing these reports and helping states, they're also helping Ohio as well, another big oil producing state, is, the bills are going to be huge. What they are estimating for Pennsylvania is about $1 billion a year in damage.
Now, can you put some, you talk about that, you talk about damage to infrastructure, et cetera. Can you just put a specific on it? Like, what does that mean? $1 billion in damage to what?
Well, it's what is climate change doing? It's the fires, it's the floods, so we're getting excess rain, we're getting excess snow if you're a state on the East Coast. We've got sea level rise. So, you've got these states that New Jersey's already talking about, we're building all these seawalls and we're doing this and we're doing that. Well, why should New Jersey taxpayers have to pay for a seawall when they actually haven't, here's the thing about the fossil fuel industry and what gets cited, because California announced their lawsuit against big oil back in September. And the big thing about it, and the thing that people really have to understand, and we've talked about it before on the show, big oil knew 50 years ago, they knew in the 60s that burning fossil fuels was changing the chemistry of the atmosphere, and that heating up the atmosphere was going to cause catastrophic weather events. They also knew there was a very small window where governments and communities could sort of readjust. But when the science started coming out against it, fossil fuel then spent millions of dollars discrediting the science. I had a neighbor yesterday sort of telling me, well, renewables are too expensive because of rare earth metals. I'm like, where did you get that talking point from? Well, those talking points come from the fossil fuels misinformation campaign. And when our governor, Gavin Newsom, launched the California suing of big oil, Shell instantly responded by saying, the courtroom is not the proper place to address combating climate change. It needs to be a collaborative, society-wide approach, which, it does, but it actually needs to be every single lever that we have now, where we, fight this, this problem, or, tackle this problem. And they, Shell sort of then said, we fully support the need to transition to a low carbon future. Well, the fact is, all these fossil fuels, companies say that, but then they do these, absolute sort of, about faces of any kind of green pledge that they've made as soon as there's some money to be made. They walk back on any of the, the pledges that they're making. And what's really interesting is that when voters are educated and find out that big oil knew about the damage that the burning of all the fossil fuels was going to create, and then started this misinformation campaign so that, they could obfuscate the science for as long as possible. They could stop any kind of action against fossil fuels and their huge, multi-million, billion-dollar profits. Voters who know about that agree that that big oil should be footing the bill for the damage, that it shouldn't be the taxpayer.
I love that we talk about this because this is, I often get, well, what can we do about it? What can we do about it? The reality is, and the state of the state is that this is one thing being done. It's trying to slowly, incrementally perhaps, hold these oil companies and fossil fuel companies responsible for a lot of the damage that has been wrought by their policies. The door has been left open to doing that damage by government. I mean, rollback of minimal regulations or no regulations at all. And Montana, I wonder if you could just remind everyone about the Montana case brought by young people in a Montana court about the way in which the fossil fuel industry has been granted leasing rights in Montana. Because that is that's a case where those young people who brought that case actually prevailed.
Yeah, that was fantastic. The judge totally sided with them, saying, yes, it is constitutional. And this was a case by these young climate activists actually against their state agencies who were granting fossil fuel companies the rights to drill without any assessment of the damage that the greenhouse gas emissions would cause to them and their health. You know, that yes, they have a constitutional right to have, you know, clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. So that was, taking their state agencies to court. And what we're talking about, today, which I think is right. I think you have to hold them accountable, just as you have to hold, big oil accountable. And the fact is, so there have been more than 20 of these climate liability suits from local and state governments in the US. And this month in Hawaii, and this is, makes this the most important climate case in the US right now, their Supreme Court has ruled that a lawsuit against big oil can move to trial because, yes, they are right. Big oil has caused all this damage knowingly. This is the thing. It's just like, it's like the big tobacco playbook all over again. And in fact, they use the same lawyers that big tobacco used. Big tobacco knew that their product was, people were getting addicted, people were dying, but they were so dedicated to their profits. And, same way as the fossil fuel companies. I mean, the thing about the fossil fuel companies is it's not just the people who smoke and the people who get the secondhand smoke. We're talking about fossil fuel companies are poisoning the planet for everyone. So it's that thing, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, a handful of people get super rich and everyone else gets poisoned.
And I have to say that this, and it exists in our chat all the time. I mean, like this kind of thing. I'm assuming that all the young people in Montana have stopped using oil-based products. It's from Randy. Who likes to say that kind of thing. And fossil fuels, this is also built your EVs and power them. That's from Jolly Red. Yeah, we understand the idea isn't somehow that, let's be fair. There couldn't be some sort of consumer-based revolt against fossil fuel, the industry, the plastic industry, all the rest. It can't happen sufficiently given the fact that we're inundated and our lifestyle is based upon it. It can't happen in a way that would make a difference. So the courts have to be used, as Belinda has said, as a lever against these fossil fuel industries that knew of the damage even as they exploit these situations. So this is true of the cases against Monsanto. So I guess so no one's using the pesticides? Is that what you're telling me, Mark? You don't use a pesticide? The reality is that if those are the only things out there, they do get used. But we've been a carbon-based economy for a long time. We're transitioning off of it. Yeah. So I think it's a weak sauce argument, I guess is what I'm getting to, and I should have gotten to it sooner. But it's a weak sauce argument to say, so I guess those young people, they don't use plastics at all? Come on, guys. Come on.
No. Look, here's the thing is we're in an uncomfortable transition. Fossil fuels were fantastic, and they completely were the power behind the Industrial Revolution, and still are in developing countries that are still industrializing. They are powering it. And, we owe a lot to that energy source, but we are now, uncomfortably aware of how polluting it is. We are destroying the, planetary systems on which our health and the planet's health, are completely reliant. And so now that we have all this knowledge, we need to transition and change.
Oh, lost Belinda for a second.
Stop driving immediately and stop using plastic. I mean, you look at people. There's a woman, I can't remember her name now. She's on Instagram, and they have a plastic-free life. Well, they spend their whole lives, shopping and doing to avoid plastic. It's like a full-time job. So,
sure,
yes, of course, this is an uncomfortable moment, but we have to embrace it and we have to surrender. We just have to surrender to what is and accept the facts. Burning fossil fuels is polluting our home. We have one planet. A lot of us have children. People who are listening will also have grandchildren. We want them to, have a sustainable future. I mean, that's what the UN talks about, is we have to treat this planet in a sustainable way for the generations that come after us. And the fossil fuel industry is not doing that. And that is completely irresponsible.
We're dropping dead from cancers and a bunch of other things because we're inundated by these carcinogens and the pollutants that infect the soil, the water, and the air, in addition to this fossil fuel stuff. But I love the legal case. And by the way, somebody in the chat, I know I hate to respond to chats, but just because we have such little time. Somebody says, where is it? This is about EVs. Oh, here it is. Jolly says, no one is buying EVs. Dude, you're wrong. Everybody's buying EVs. In fact, the auto industry is scrambling to handle the demand for EVs. You may not see them in your neighborhood yet in sufficient numbers for you to be convinced, but trust me, my friend, read about it. You want to talk about a pivot? That is a massive pivot going on in Detroit. Look at the UAW deal that they just made. It refers to EVs in a big, big way. EVs are the future. It is coming. And so the idea that nobody's buying EVs, just the opposite. Sorry, wrong. So go ahead, Belinda. I'm sorry. We have another minute.
Well, we've talked about EVs on the show before. I mean, what they're doing in Asia with the EVs is unbelievable. China is the biggest producer of small EVs. They're going all over Asia. That thing we talked about the batteries, that you don't have to sit in a charging station. You have removable batteries. So you just drive in to, like you're going to a gas station and you switch out your empty battery for a full battery and away you go. I mean, the innovations that are happening with transport are huge. And the pivot that's being made to renewable energy, I mean, that's huge too. And, we do have naysayers whose, profits are totally tied to I'm going to call them the old ways, because they're going to be the old ways soon. And like I keep saying, it's, change is hard. It's super hard for human beings. We don't like it, but we have to do it for our own good. And if you have children and if you have nieces, nephews, this stuff is super, super vital. And I'm a person who's already had a cancer that's linked to benzene. And where does benzene come from? Benzene comes from the tailpipes of automobiles and
the stove,
oil refineries. And it used to be, men in their 70s, and the statistics were it was mainly black men. And when you think about Louisiana and Cancer Alley and where all those oil refineries are, who got multiple myeloma, the cancer that I got. And, I'd never heard of it before I got it. And now I'm hearing of people getting it all over the place, including a lot of other blood cancers. So, it's game on. And I'm not
cooking on the gas stove emits benzene as well, as you've mentioned.
I just want to say, I'm not saying this stuff to say poor me. I'm just pointing it out to say, like, ding dong, reality check, everyone.
No, it's ubiquitous. I mean, it's so everywhere that you just can't avoid it. That's the problem with these carcinogens. So anyway, to get back to square one, and on the EV thing, I'll just say this quickly. We started with these legal cases, and I think it's a great place to start. And there has to be, and you've pointed this out before, some ownership of what happens on down the chain. When you produce a product that is not sustainable, you as a company need to own how society has to pay for the lack of that sustainability. You've made that point before when it comes to recycling and plastics and other things and fossil fuel related products. But when it comes to EVs, I'm just seeing a lot of this in the chat, that they're at 7% consumption right now. And it reminds me of what they say about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, they say, it happens incredibly slowly and then all at once. That's how people go bankrupt. That's how companies go bankrupt. Incredibly slowly and then all at once. I would say that's where we are on EVs and a lot of essentially the reckoning moments that we're dealing with when it comes to the planet. It's happening incredibly slowly and then all at once. The pivot to EVs is big. It's real. And the chance that we have to grab to try to at least in some way pull back on the way the planet is warming. Those are my thoughts.
I just have to address Spencer here saying EVs catch on fire a lot in bad weather. That just isn't true.
No, I didn't see
Fossil
that.
fuel, what do we see when we watch a movie where people want to burn something? They use gasoline, they put it all over the stuff and they throw a match on it. Fossil fuels are way more flammable than EVs and there are many, many more fires.
Where's Kim when I need her? Spencer, how dare you?
I mean,
Spencer, please.
Yeah,
I love Spencer too, but come on. Spencer, now you're just throwing crap out there. It's outrageous. It's just outrageous, Spencer.
Good day, sir.
Exactly. My God.
It's just funny because we have these, this is just more information, misinformation. And it was like the thing, when you and I were talking the other day about how many birds get killed by wind turbines. So MIT data has just come out saying 27 times more birds are killed per unit of kilowatt hour produced by fossil fuels than by wind turbines. 27 times more. So you've just got to look where you're getting your facts and don't get them from the fossil fuel industry and big oil, please, because they are leading you down a path that is not good for you. It's not good for our planet.
Yeah, and you can't just pick one fact. You have to look at both facts from both sides. That is to say, the damage done by fossil fuel industry, and there is, the process of mining for those things that go in batteries. That's not a completely clean process at all, right? So you have to, I think you have to do that arithmetic as well. And
what you say is the political dogma that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Yes, that's right. That's my specialty. All right, so Belinda, love our time together. Thank you for launching an hour early today.
Yes, totally my pleasure.
If you want to reach Belinda, you can find her on social media and all the different places that social media exists. You know what social media is. Belinda Waymouth is Waymouth. Belinda Waymouth, we love you, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Love you guys too. Bye-bye.
Right, that's It's the Planet Stupid for today.
More.
It's the Planet Stupid.
No. It's the Planet Stupid. Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
When we drop the video, you'll cinch that up, right, Albert? Won't even be a pause there, will there?
No, it'll be like nothing happened. I was expecting to give Belinda applause on the way out. So
you're right. You're right. That is my bad. I should have given her applause.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I owe her.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Yeah, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. All right, there's some breaking news in politics. We'll get into that. We also will hit all the other things that are going on in the world.
Smashed it with your iron
Please
rod.
smash us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. I haven't hit you for money, and I'm still not hitting you for money today. I'm just asking you for something that's free, which is a thumbs up.
Smashed it with your iron
We
rod.
talked about the state of the GOP. We talked about the debate and some of the situations and highlights of that debate and some of the topics that came up. Then we just gave you a little something on the planet. Coming up, David Katz, the brilliant former prosecutor. We'll talk about what's happening in the Trump trial, also what's happening with, I'd say the Trump trial, in the chain of witnesses that have all been the Trump family of late in court. And then what's happening with the decision in Minnesota that was an attempt essentially to get Trump off the ballot because of his violation of the 14th Amendment. We'll talk about that judge's decision there. And then in the next hour as well, George Shlatter, the creator of Laugh-In, joins us. So that and more. All those things to look forward to. I'll leave anything out, Albert. I know. It's a lot. I think there's
never been anything like this.
Well, I mean, in a sense. All right. Kim's News and then hour two, Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And this report is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia will not run for re-election in 2024.
What?
He announced it today on social media. It is breaking news, and here is his quote. "I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate, but what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is any interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together."
Wow.
That is what Manchin said in a statement. What does that mean? Is he running for something? Is what's happening here?
And this is their new hoax.
Okay,
The
well,
Democratic
I don't know.
caucus controls the chamber with a very narrow 51 to 49 margin. Manchin's decision not to run again in a very, very red state puts Democrats in kind of a tough spot. They will be defending seats in other competitive states as well. So we'll see what the fallout is of Joe Manchin deciding today and announcing today that he will not be running for re-election.
Well, this is exactly what I used to tell you on KGO, and exactly what I was saying even as this show started, and we get around to Joe Manchin on any number of things. You'll remember Joe Manchin has been a critical figure and a logjam on various things that President Biden wanted to get done. Joe Manchin sort of became, remember they call him President Manchin because he seemed to be the vote that you had to win over to get things passed in the Senate. So what I told you at the time, because people said, look, he's just, he is essentially a Republican, posing as a Democrat. I used to tell you that, yeah, can't argue with that, except the fact that he's a Democrat is a huge deal because now you have a majority. I mean, it's the slimmest majority imaginable, but you're able to have control over various committees, over agendas. These are all things that accrue to the party that is the majority. So the fact that he had a D in front of his name, as corrupt as the guy is, he's clearly corrupt. He takes more money from the fossil fuel industry than any other member of Congress. But this guy, while he retains interest within that industry, but this guy, in all of his corruption, was critical to the Democrats for control of those things I just mentioned. So the loss of Joe Manchin and the likely pickup of that seat, of that Senate seat by the Republicans, that could be a huge, huge story for the future. So that is big, big news.
Some 80 countries and organizations are meeting in Paris to find ways to help wounded civilians in Gaza. This comes as Israeli troops and Hamas militants battled through bombed-out buildings in Gaza City today. This war going on for more than a month now. In the North Bay, the 23-year-old man accused of beheading his grandmother at a home in Santa Rosa is now charged with her murder. The man is accused of killing a 64-year-old woman last Thursday, leaving with her head, then, I guess, dumping it on a riverbank and fleeing to San Francisco. The head later recovered on the south bank of Santa Rosa Creek, just south of downtown. The man had just been released from state prison a few days before the attack. He was supposed to check in with his probation department on Thursday. Of course, he never did. Yet another local city council meeting disrupted by anti-Semitic racist comments. It's happening all over. This one during public comment section yesterday at Sonoma City Council meeting. The hateful comments were made during Zoom calls in which one person also released personal information about council members. The virtual comments were muted. The people were kicked out of the meeting. Unlike other city councils that also have had to deal with hate speech in recent weeks, the Sonoma City Council says it will not be doing away with public comments made via Zoom. But we've seen in recent days that there are many city council members that are saying, you know what? If you want to speak, if you want to have public comment, you're going to have to show up in person and show us your face and not hide behind a keyboard because it's such a big problem. In San Jose, police are making it their mission to bring justice to families. Officers solved all 36 homicide cases from last year. No cold cases left behind. That's a 100% clearance rate. For comparison, the national number averages just 51% of cases solved. City Council honoring the achievements by presenting a commendation to the homicide unit. The vice mayor said she hopes people see how dedicated the police department is when it comes to doing the right thing. The search is on for a possible arsonist on the loose in San Leandro. Flames destroyed a 7-Eleven yesterday. Part of the roof caved in there. Huge clouds of black smoke went up into the sky. Witnesses reported seeing someone set a bush on fire right next to the store. A worker tried to put it out, but that fire just grew so fast and spread. The response shut down traffic on 14th Street between 138th and San Leandro Boulevard. Big thoroughfares in San Leandro. There's some more details coming out about whether to charge drivers on Bay Area freeways. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission is studying that as one way to ease up congestion. During a meeting last night, experts said the fee to add tolls to all lanes in 2035 would range from 10 to 30 cents on highways that run parallel to public transit. A chart also estimating the cost for driving 40 miles a day, which came out to $270 a month. That's how much extra you would pay.
Yeah, you'll need to pay if that goes through.
If that goes through and they decide to make our roads toll roads, that's another $270 a month. Crazy.
Well, I take particular exception to it because I need those people to be our Patreon and PayPal supporters.
Yes.
I cannot have them stressed in any way.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
They want to take more money away from my Patreon and PayPal supporters. I don't think there has been enough of that conversation.
Who is having that conversation?
Not nobody. That's my point. It's outrageous. They want to hit us with toll roads, and they're taking money from my supporters.
Why are you yelling?
How am I going to keep this show on the air? I mean, it's outrageous.
Do you know who I am?
Thank you.
I'm kind of a big deal.
I want that in the conversation, Kim. I really do.
Why are you yelling?
What else is having trouble staying on the air, as it were? ChatGPT. Big ChatGPT user, are you? Well, it continues to experience intermittent outages after Wednesday's major outage. OpenAI claiming a distributed denial of service attack is behind the problems. The outages come 2 days after OpenAI's first in-person developers conference. Somebody says, no thank you, boom. Airbnb releasing its quarterly earnings data with numbers that blow away Wall Street estimates. The company reported $6.63 a share earnings. Analysts expected $2.15 a share. That's a 20% year-over-year growth, 270% better than the street expected. So Airbnb is looking pretty good right now.
Wow, Airbnb, which was embattled, troubled, and sort of being groomed for obscurity. Remember? I mean, they were, because everything going on with Airbnb, they're involved in some lawsuits, but then they beat street estimates on their profits. Wow.
Lastly, and just in case you're in Florida trying to, go to amusement parks today, many of the rides at Universal Studios Florida are shut down while the park undergoes technical issues. It's a tech issue day, I guess.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Didn't explain what the complications were, but said a portion of the park is closed down. Crews are working to fix the problem as soon as possible, and park goers are encouraged to check out the Universal Orlando mobile app for additional updates.
What he's got going here is a situation.
Yeah, it is a situation.
Check the app.
The best people working on it, of course, and Emil Dr. Emil Schofhausen's crew. He has a crew out there too, which is great. Yeah.
This report is sponsored by the amazing folks at Coachella Valley Coffee. It's delicious tea, delicious coffee, so good. Did you take some with you when you traveled?
Let me tell you what just came in last night. I haven't even tried it yet.
What do you
They have a new holiday blend. Can you see this? The holiday blend.
Here, can you make Mark big? Make Mark big. Yeah, make him big.
There we go. That's the holiday blend. It's brand new. I literally just got it, so I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
A holiday blend.
Yeah, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. When you
There's
order
never been anything like this.
Use the code MARKT for 10% off, as Kim would tell you. But the other thing I just want to mention to you is I'm going to try to work out something for them with this holiday blend, there might be some kind of other packaging or something for my listeners and viewers. So I'm hoping, I have to talk to them. I haven't really mentioned, this is the first I've talked about it, so they may not be able to manage it. But this holiday blend, I'm looking forward to.
That's a great holiday gift.
Yes,
yeah.
throughout the holidays.
Log in and order it. I'm going to get my 10% off by putting Mark T at checkout.
I might send a pound of the holiday blend to David Katz.
Really?
As a sign of my ongoing appreciation for his offerings here on the show.
Well, let's get right to him. I'm Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you very much.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, I'm very happy to be back. I really am. Back just in time to talk to this guy, the former federal prosecutor. Now he works the defense side of the table. You can hear him on London radio. They hit him for various analyses on any number of legal issues in this country, on Fox News Channel, on KNX radio in Los Angeles, on KCBS radio in San Francisco. He's everywhere. But I've got him for you every Thursday out of the kindness of David Katz's heart. Here he is, David Katz, everybody.
Well, it's great to be with you, Mark. You're a great interviewer, and really, I enjoy being with you a lot.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I want to start I know we got the Trump stuff, and we will get to it, but I want to talk about this thing that you had touched on before, what was going on in a Minnesota courtroom, where essentially they're trying to point out that Donald Trump was in violation of the 14th Amendment stipulation as to who can run for president. I mean, he is behind this insurrection and the attempt to turn over the democracy. As a result, he shouldn't be eligible to be on the ballot, is the argument that was made in Minnesota. What did that Minnesota judge decide, and how did she decide it?
Well, this was the Supreme Court of Minnesota. There's a case pending in front of a judge, a trial judge in Colorado. But this case went directly up to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Depending how it had been decided, the only appeal now would be to the U.S. Supreme Court, asking them to accept certiorari. They could or could not. And it doesn't look like anyone is going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court based on this Minnesota Supreme Court state decision. What they said, they kind of ducked the issue. They kicked the can down the road because what they said is there's no statute in Minnesota that precludes a political party from nominating someone who's ineligible. So if you were a 25-year-old who really caught fire and you were about to win the Republican primary in Minnesota, apparently they couldn't keep you off the ballot because no statute stops the Republican Party from nominating somebody for president who's obviously ineligible for the job, someone who's merely 25 years old. And so they kicked the can down the road by saying, well, he's not nominated yet. And there's no statute that says that he cannot be nominated. So let's wait and see if he gets nominated early next year. And then we would take his emergency appeal at that point. Now, there's an idea in this ripeness. You know, the idea is it's not ripe yet. There are some cases that sort of never become ripe. Maybe a case of someone who's in gestation. You know, there's a fetus involved. And by the time the case gets through the appellate circuit, it's always going to not be ripe or it's going to be moot. But they apparently don't think it's that kind of a case. It's one that they can get to. It's not what we call capable of repetition, but evading review. It would be reviewed if, in fact, the Republicans nominate Trump. Now, what else is interesting is that the Republicans, I think, have to think long and hard in these states. Do they really want to nominate Trump instead of someone like Haley, who would clearly be eligible to run and face off against Biden or whoever? Do they really want to nominate someone who gets knocked off the ballot in one of these states? So I guess that's what's going on right now. But Minnesota is not going to keep him off the ballot. And Trump says great victory, which it's not. It's just kicking the can down the road. And I think the state doesn't want to go to the U.S. Supreme Court right now because the state officials who are trying to keep Trump off the ballot in Minnesota because he's not eligible, because he engaged in the insurrection by, encouraging the marauding of the Capitol on January 6th. I think they think it's not a case the Supreme Court would take right now. So it's kind of a big nothing burger, but interesting legally as hell.
Yeah, and I think, and this I'd love to get your thought on it. You could take Trump off the ballot in states where he likely wouldn't carry anyway, and it may not affect the election. But when you get to states where he might win, you do begin to affect the election prominently. I mean, it's a bad look, but Trump would play it as the aggrieved party to be taken off the ballot in certain states. But it's likely the states that would take him off, he wouldn't carry anyway, I guess is my point.
Yes, well, the rubber really hits the road in a state like Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is controlled by Democrats. A Democratic attorney general or secretary of state on behalf of the ballot could bring this kind of lawsuit in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And then if the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said Trump cannot be on the ballot, he'd have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court right away. But I think the U.S. Supreme Court would take that case. And I think if you're betting money, probably 5-4, 6-3, they say that Trump has a federal right to run for president. And his federal right is being abridged or denied by the ruling of the state court in Pennsylvania. That would be his federal question. That would be his way to get to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's why, on balance, although I think David K. Johnston, I mentioned this, has argued very persuasively on this issue, and I certainly get it, that this is a sui generis kind of unique insurrection. And so the counter, which is they could invent some insurrection that supposedly Biden or Newsom or whoever was part of and try to keep them off a ballot in a swing state and tilt the presidency against Biden or Newsom, I don't think really is going to occur, because the insurrection of the Capitol on January 6th was so much the sort of thing that the framers of the 14th Amendment had in mind. And whatever made up insurrection there would be later on is not what they had in mind. But again, just to clear the decks, I think if this ever goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it would before it really had teeth, I think the U.S. Supreme Court would allow Trump to stay on the ballot. And so I think he'll be on the ballot in all 50 states. If you want to beat him, organize and vote. Don't wait for a court.
Yeah, so well put. And, I'm just looking to see exactly the consistency of Minnesota is sort of purplish, you know what I mean? So it's interesting to look over. There are 10 electoral college votes, by the way, in Minnesota. So moving on now to the clear GOP frontrunner, Donald Trump, and his family, all of whom were sort of paraded through the same courtroom on this fraud. The fraud trial, the guilty part or the liability part has already been decided, David. You made that clear. So now we're hearing testimony that will affect penalty. Is that what's going on?
Yes. And of course, we had the zany, bombastic appearance of Trump. I like to quote the movie And Justice for All, where Pacino says, "I'm out of order, Judge. You're out of order." This was Trump. "Judge, I'm a fraud. You're a fraud." Let me tell you, the judge is not a fraud. He had every right in the world to decide this. Trump says, "You decided against me without even knowing me." Well, that happens to you. Eh? Courts don't get to know you. And, to know Trump, I believe, and what he's shown us, right, as voters, as people who've had to live under his realm as president for 4 years, we know him, and we get the fact that he is one of the biggest frauds to ever come down the pike. And what he did was just gross fraud, and what his organization did. Let me just give you a couple of examples. First of all, the complaint was over 200 pages against him. He did everything he could to obstruct that complaint being filed. He tried to obstruct the investigation. He didn't turn over to the state attorney general the discovery he was required to. He got fined $110,000 back then. And then finally, when the case went forward, we had such wonderful chestnuts as he has an apartment, which he said was 3 times as large as it is. That's not an opinion, that's a measurement. He said it was worth 3 times what it was because he lied and said it was 3 times as large. That was a key part of his financial statements. Another feature was that he took places that either had rent control or rent stabilization, and so they could only, let's say, get $2,000 a month rent. He said, well, in the market, people get $10,000 a month. Well, yes, they get $10,000 a month rent on places that aren't rent controlled and rent stabilized. So to say that his places would rent for $10,000 and there were so many units, he magnified 8 times or 6 times, whatever, what he could actually get for that apartment. He took places like Mar-a-Lago, where there's a covenant and an agreement not to develop it into condos, and he stated a value, $1.5 billion, as though it could all be broken into condos and be sold as 1,000 condos when it can't be broken into condos at all. And on it went. One last thing about that case, because a lot of people have talked about the fact that he not only overvalued the properties for the banks, but he undervalued them as to the state taxing officials. As I see it, the undervaluation to the state taxing officials is not part of this particular case. The reason that he might get hit for $250 million in damages is because that's what the banks, had they known the truth, would have charged them for the loans. They would charge them, so far the proof is at least $160 million more for the loans. He would have had a higher interest rate, and he would have had to pay $160 million more. That's whether the properties, Mark, made money or not. Now, he had good luck that real estate in New York went up, but had it gone down, he would have been one of those people who couldn't have covered, because his financial statements claimed he had assets worth at least $3 billion. He didn't have them. So if it went down, he couldn't cover. And that was the idea of having collateral. That was the idea of having financial statements that falsely said he was worth $3 billion. That's why he kept saying he was worth $3 billion. And that's what Ivanka Trump got herself involved with, even though the statute of limitations ran against her, because once Trump got to be president, she had nothing more to do with the real estate company. She and her husband went off and made friends with the Saudis, and her husband now has the $2 billion chunk of change to invest for the Saudis. But she was not involved in the real estate, so she got lucky. The statute of limitations had run, but she was all part of that thing, knowing that her father had to have financial statements that showed he was worth $3 billion. She communicated with the banks about that, and that's why she was in trouble. But she made a lovely impression. She smiled, and she wasn't bombastic like Daddy.
Yeah, well, she was very red carpety when she entered. You know, that she had the red carpet bounce to her step, and it was a weird. It felt like the Met. Is it the Met opening that they do in New York?
Gala.
Yeah, the Met Gala.
She just come from the wedding. She just come from the wedding or something with her friend Kim Kardashian. So she's not with all those crude people, you know, like Michael Cohen anymore and Weisselberg. Now she has new friends, the Kardashians.
So I think it's really important, something David said, in addition to everything that David said, but there is not that you should necessarily cry tears for the banks, but when inflating wealth, you get a better deal from the banks than you would otherwise. And so Trump skated on the deal he'd actually get had his assets actually been valued at what they are. And so that's part of this case. But you touched on something else, David Katz, and that is the tax avoidance associated with the undervaluing of properties to the man. Okay, so you're telling the man, I don't have these properties worth a lot of money, because you're trying to skate on big taxes, which are related to how much the properties are worth. But you're telling the banks that they're worth a whole ton because you're looking for that break that I just described in terms of the loan. Talk to me about the taxes and when the state, or if the state, is going to come after Donald Trump for some of that.
Well, you know, Trump picked the head of the IRS, and the head of the IRS picked by Trump was extremely controversial. Somehow the IRS under Trump's pick managed to pick out, for two incredibly intrusive audits, Trump's two biggest enemies at the FBI. This has been investigated by some special prosecutor, special investigator, and said it was a mathematical chance, 1 in 10 million, that both Comey and the fellow under him, who were huge enemies of Trump from Trump's point of view, they both got picked for these audits that were incredibly intrusive. It starts with, like, what's your name? And then they say, okay, where's your birth certificate? And it goes on from there. People say, you know, it's like a mugging, but by the IRS. So he was a very controversial IRS commissioner. He was picked by Trump. Anyway, he did not, and the IRS did not, criminally investigate or refer Trump for criminal prosecution for cheating on his taxes. I'm shocked to find out that happened under the Trump administration. So now you turn to the state, right? And, you know, the state sometimes is very lax about collecting taxes. They sort of figure they'll take the lead from the feds. That's a lot of times what happens. So with Mar-a-Lago, for instance, he said that Mar-a-Lago couldn't be developed. It was worth very little money. And so he didn't pay much. I think they have property tax down there. I think they have some kind of income tax, but it may be that's why people go to Florida, because they don't pay much income tax. So he might not have evaded much income tax. The property tax, apparently nobody made much of a big deal about that. And then in the state of New York, remember, people expected that he would be prosecuted for that. that local prosecutor, that DA, the one who could lock Trump up, who could bring criminal charges. He had the special prosecutors. They were looking at this whole thing to bring the state taxes and the overvaluation as to the banks as a state prosecution. And then the newly elected DA in New York decided not to go on that case. That was Bragg. Those two people quit. One of them, it was very controversial. He wrote a book about it. And then after a while, Bragg didn't bring that case, although people thought that was the big case that was going to be the vehicle to put Trump in jail finally. He brought just the Michael Cohen case, the Stormy Daniels case, the not disclosing as a campaign contribution, it was a campaign violation to have paid Stormy Daniels over $100,000 to have Michael Cohen pay it. So that case is still pending. That's the first case that was brought. That's the case where people said, oh my God, after all the things Trump has done wrong, that's the only criminal music he's going to face. And then, of course, there have been the three major cases since then, in my view, not only more substantial, but also much clearer in terms of the evidence, overwhelming in terms of the evidence than that New York not properly keeping business records as to paying Stormy Daniels.
Just on those cases, David, because I think, you have made this point that they are more, in a way, relevant or more, the prospects and penalties are far more grave, might be another way to put it. The timeline on those is still, on some of them, not good. Good for Trump, but not good for justice being done, or at least being heard in a courtroom prior to the election. But what about the J6? What about the Jack Smith case? Is that timeline also one that now appears cloudy, or what? Give us the latest on that.
No, I don't think that one's cloudy. I think that's the one that may actually get to trial before the election. And, when they took that poll where, because of all the problems in the world and, ongoing inflation, Biden actually finished behind Trump in some of the major swing states. But they also asked people, that New York Times poll, what if Trump got found guilty, by a jury? And that would change enough people's mind that even at this, I believe, momentary dip in his popularity, even now, Biden would be ahead of Trump with those people who were polled because if the jury came back and found Trump guilty. So that is something that really could happen with a trial that will begin in March, the January 6th case before Judge Chutkan in the D.C. federal court, where I was a law clerk some moons ago, but in that courthouse where I was a law clerk. And she is very focused on the fact that this case needs to get to trial and not to fall for any of these defense stratagems, which might be totally legitimate in another case. But here there is a huge public interest in getting Trump to trial and finding out from a jury of his peers whether they think he's guilty or not guilty. Let him trumpet a not guilty verdict if that's what's in his future. I don't think that's what's in his future in the January 6th trial. But Mark, they've done a couple of things to make sure that case does stay on track. One is that the special prosecutor has identified two issues that could lead to an interlocutory appeal. Generally, you have to bring all of your complaints about how unfairly you were treated by the judge in rulings, in motions, and how he or she handled the jury in your case. Bring it all at the end in what's called the final judgment rule. But there's two things that you can appeal early. And the idea is if the appellate court said, well, we need to hear this and decide it's going to take more time, they might delay the trial while they did so. One is the so-called presidential immunity, which I think is nonsense. I don't think there is such a thing that precludes a former president from being trialed. People haven't heard of such a thing. It's inventive, and I think it's a loser. The other thing is double jeopardy. He actually makes this claim, which I think is frivolous, that having been tried by the Senate for impeachment, the second trial in the Senate, he has had double jeopardy as to a federal indictment against him. Now, we don't have double jeopardy if there's a state case and a federal case about the same nucleus of facts. So there is no way that this is a winner. But there is a rule that a double jeopardy claim can be appealed because you have the right not to be put in jeopardy twice. Not a right to complain after the trial under the final judgment rule. You have a right not to be put in jeopardy twice. So you say, wait a second, I'm about to be put in jeopardy twice. Court of Appeals, you need to decide this. So Jack Smith said to the judge, decide these two. so that if you rule in the government's favor, they can run to the Court of Appeals and not delay your March trial. The other thing that they've just done is regarding the advice of counsel. And if you'd like to talk about that, it's
this is really key. Let's finish with this because this is super important.
So the advice of counsel goes like this. If he really did rely on lawyers, okay, now there's a whole lot of doubt about that because remember the judge in the Central District of California, right here, actually the court that sits in Orange County is part of our district, the one where I was an assistant United States attorney for years. Judge Carter down there had an issue because Professor Eastman was trying to keep his files secret under attorney-client privilege. And the judge said there's an exception to the attorney-client privilege, the crime fraud exception. If you were committing a crime or a fraud, or if Trump was committing one with you, you don't have a right to commit a crime or a fraud with an attorney any more than you have a right to commit a crime or a fraud with anyone else. And the judge looked at those papers and said, you know what? You guys were more likely than not committing a crime or a fraud. You and or Trump. It's enough if only Trump was doing it through you. That means that Trump doesn't have a right under attorney-client privilege to keep it secret. So we already have a ruling from a very distinguished federal judge, which was not won on appeal. So it's a standing decision. It's only a trial court decision, but still it's a standing decision. If you want to make this advice of counsel defense, you can't just say, well, a lawyer told me at a cocktail party. There's all these things that you have to do. And then the other side is entitled to discovery. So Trump agreed that he would do this by January 15th. If he hadn't agreed, the judge might have imposed an even earlier date. But she imposed January 15th, by which he has to tell the court, one, I will rely on the advice of counsel. Number two, here are all the documents that would otherwise be privileged that I am going to rely on. And number three, and this is key, all the documents that are relevant to undercut my defense. You can't cherry pick. So if you go to the lawyer and you tell him, look, all the people are telling me this is a terrible thing. We lost in 60 courts. I can't get an opinion from anybody. And the lawyer says to you, well, I really want to work at your administration. Okay. So let me tell you my advice about it. There's a special way you can do this. You can't hold that document back and just give them the second or third meeting with Eastman, or just the memo where Eastman says to you, everything you're doing, Mr. President, is lawful. You can stay in office under my plan A, B, C, and D. So that's what he's going to have to turn over. And I've been in a lot of battles like that. I've had a case that was a genuine advice of counsel and also advice of accountant, but we had to turn over everything. And they did a very vigorous job of going through it and trying to make an issue of it. And then the court decides, can you put on the advice of counsel? Can you not put on the advice of counsel? How much of it really might be stricken, or something that you shouldn't be able to present? So I think ultimately he's going to go nowhere because he got so much advice from counsel that was, White House counsel, that was very distinguished, that had said 4 or 5 things that he wanted to do, he could do. But they said, no, Mr. Trump, you cannot do this. You lost all the cases. There's no basis for it. Barr actually went out of his way to do things that he really shouldn't have done under the regulations to run down all of Trump's crazy theories. And he said, I've run down your crazy theories. I've overturned all of these rocks. And guess what? There's nothing under the rocks. You lost fair and square everywhere. There's no basis for fraud. And then Trump tried to get rid of him. So all of that is going to come in. Whether Trump discussed that with the lawyers, Mark, is going to come in. And ultimately, that one's not going to work. But that's one he loves to bandy about. And that was one of the ones that people say, John Lauro, who I know, and I think is a good lawyer, under a lot of pressure from Trump, obviously, to do Trump's bidding. I think he went a little bit too far with the press where he said, we're going to rely on advice of counsel. And you go and say things like that to the media, it may be good for the base, but then you're going to get emotion just like this. You're going to rely on advice of counsel. So your attorney says to the media, well, we want you to tell us by January 15th, and we want you to produce all those documents, good, bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, about your supposed advice of counsel defense. And of course, you're in contempt if you don't do it.
We have to wrap up, but I think you make such a good point there at the end here, because what we're seeing, you saw it in the Trump testimony, you see them saying one thing to the media, and then the stuff they say to the media, they have to own in a courtroom, and you can't quite get away with that. And Trump's popping off on the witness stand seemed to be designed just to get out to the media. I mean, he knew that this case is gone. I mean, that was my sense of it. And he was just simply trying to pollute the discourse with whatever he had to say. David, I have to wrap. I so appreciate your time. We didn't even get to the boat case. They found that boat captain. I guess manslaughter is what they got him on, right, David? It was multiple manslaughter.
A kind of involuntary manslaughter. I saw that one coming. I am going to take 17. And Mark, I'm glad that you brought it up.
Katz is still, unbeaten.
It was a huge tragedy. All of those people passed away. I think a couple of your viewers wrote in and said that they knew somebody.
Yes.
And my condolences and everybody's condolences. But, his argument was that he's a 66-year-old guy. He was just making a day rate while he was out there. But he'd been a captain for a long time. And whether he was rich or not, he should have taken care to have a night watchman. They said that the defense tried to argue, well, it's so expensive to have a patrol boat and the patrol boat might have missed it. Mark, it wasn't just a patrol boat. Someone should have been sitting there whose job was to stay up all night, and the first sign of fire, not because they're in a patrol boat somewhere nearby, they're sitting right there on that ship and they're making sure that boat, making sure. And then the other thing I always wanted to know, and I don't know all of these details, is how hard was it to open that hatch so that the people could get out? But to jump from that ship when you're the captain, I don't care how many flames you see, and not first, at least open that hatch, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the whole thing about how he hadn't trained the crew how to use the hoses properly. And there were hoses that, had they been trained, they could have put out that fire. And I don't mean to make people sad, but probably save some of those people's lives. The last thing
it was so negligence. Go ahead, yeah.
The last thing I want to say before I go is that News Nation now has the new Republican debate. And I'm on News Nation with Natasha a lot of weekends, so I'm happy.
Look at you, David Katz, Mr. News Nation now. I love it. But we love having you here.
Natasha on the weekend, Mark Thompson and Kim during the week.
I love it. Watch from this weekend on News Nation. There he is. That's Katsadamus, that's the artist conception of what he would look like if he were Nostradamus. But he is remarkable with his predictions and in the world and the legal realm that he occupies. Thank you, David Katz.
Great to be with you.
Bye, David. Really do appreciate it. Good stuff.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, I must click-clack along. Kim, I hope you'll pitch in because we have a guy who is a show business legend waiting to go. He has a new book out. He has a career that spans nearly 70 years. I mean, just an amazing imprint on our culture he is responsible for. His new book is called Still Laughing: A Life in Comedy. He created Laugh In and a bunch of other stuff we'll ask him about. It's really an honor to have him join us. George Shlatter, everybody.
Nice,
George.
Thank you.
You are the real thing, my friend. It is really an honor to have you in. Look, Laugh In changed the game. But before Laugh In, this you mentioned in your book, you were a creature of Hollywood from, working at Ciro's nightclub to kind of getting into the world of a lot of those show business figures that we knew. This is before Laugh In was even an idea.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun. I worked in Vegas a lot. That was colorful, but that section of my life is not in the book that much.
That's for the next book, George?
Well, no, I don't think those stories will ever be told.
So, look,
all the guys are all dead, and I didn't do it. So. The best left untold, on the advice of my wife.
Look, you produced before Laugh In now. I'm seeing Dinah Shore, Judy Garland, Jonathan Winters, Danny Thomas, and Steve Lawrence. Wow.
Yes. And with Jackie Gleason and Bob Hope, and there was a whole bunch of them, And I was very lucky to have been able to work with all of those people. Every one of them was an adventure.
Tell me about Laugh In and how that happened.
Accident. There's so many things in my career were accidents. And NBC had Monday night at 8 o'clock was a disaster. They had Lucille Ball and Gunsmoke were opposite Monday night at 8 o'clock. So NBC had nothing to put in there. And I said, well, I'll give you a show. And it was all young people. Nobody ever heard of anybody. And so we came in with this group of young character people. And since they had nothing else to put on, NBC wasn't really paying much attention. They knew they had to put something on at 8 o'clock. And we showed up with this group of funny, outrageous, attractive, irreverent, impudent, funny people. And we put it on the air. They weren't going to air it at first. They said, this isn't like a television show. I said, yeah, it's a new television show. But I mean, that speed and the blackouts and the sight gags and everything. So they put it on the air kind of reluctantly. And before they know it, by the third show, it kind of exploded. And then we got up to a 50 share. Well, I'm arrogant now, but if you can imagine me with a 50 share. Oh. They had all of these rules, and none of them applied to Laugh-In. We broke every set of rules that they came up with, and it was a romp. It was a playpen for adults.
Yeah, it's odd how you took that moment in our culture and you really ran with it. You mentioned these performers. I mean, people like Judy Carn and Kim reminded me of Goldie Hawn. And, where did you find them? How did you know of them?
Well, it was all strange. Lily Tomlin had some failures, and she was leaving town. So she came for one last meeting with me, and she sat down in my office, and all of these characters appeared. And I said, I want you to do this show. And she said, which character? I said, I want you to do them all. Well, only because we developed that way of producing and editing. Carolyn Raskin, a brilliant woman, did all the editing. And we developed, and we could do all of Lily's characters. And then Goldie was a dancer. She didn't want to come to the meeting. She said, I'm not a comedian, I'm a dancer. So she came to this meeting, and we gave her an introduction of Dan Rowan. And she screwed it up so bad. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I'll do it again. I said, no, Goldie, that'll be just fine. And from then on, she never got to rehearse. But Artie Johnson came in with all these different characters. And Lily Tomlin and Goldie Hawn and Joanne Worley and Ruth Buzzy. Ruth Buzzy came in, and she was a wealth of characters. And so it was a lot of accident happened in Laugh-In. And now today, it's very difficult because there's so many executives now. We only had to get over, the bodies of 2 or 3, but now there's a whole room full of people you have to get clearances from.
It's funny, you reminded me of something, George, which is that you made what Goldie Hawn did, like her screw-ups. You made those part of the show. That wasn't done really elsewhere at the time. You would have retaken, but she was so adorable in the way she screwed up, and it was a part of the show regularly.
Yes, but the whole show was, we would start out with the script, and then we would tape. And since we were on an early rate card, I could tape all night long. And we did. We taped till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And we would tape the script, and then if anything went wrong, that's what we used. And so Laugh-In was like a 5-car accident happening in front of you. And it was because NBC had nothing else to put on there. They put Laugh-In on the air out of desperation. And it took like 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks. And then when it hit, and then people started to come to it, got huge rating. Well, don't give me a huge rating like that. And we only had to go through like 1 or 2 executives at that time. Now, to sell a show, you go through 10 or 12 people.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything quite as innovative. But now you're right. George, explain to us the culture for some of the younger boys and girls, and for those of us who just may not remember. First of all, Rowan and Martin. It was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. Why Rowan and Martin? Who were they?
Well, this show that I was selling, right, that I had in my head, had no hosts. And so NBC and Timex, Jim Ellis, a wonderful man at Timex, said they would buy the show, but I had to have a host. That was the only thing traditional that I had to do. Because the show originally was designed without a host. So anyhow, I went to Rowan and Martin, who were a great nightclub act. And they were straight, and they wore tuxedos, and they were older. And so we had them do the opening and the closing, and then some of the news items, and the rest of the show kind of happened around them. And so the show originally was designed without a host. And it would have worked, but it worked very well with Dan and Dick because they were older, and they let it happen. And,
yeah, oddly, they became sort of the rudder of the ship, Yes. But yeah, as it listed from one side to the other, comedically, it was so much fun. There were a couple of big things on Laugh-In. Sammy Davis Jr. created this character in this moment where he just comes through the screen occasionally, I mean, it was wild, George. How did that happen?
Accident. You've got to, if I can give one word of advice to people working in comedy, treasure the accident. Sammy Davis was an old friend of mine. Oh, good. And he came there in the middle of the night one night about 11 or 12 o'clock, and we started talking. We were doing some things in the courtroom. And he said, "Do you remember Pigmeat Markham?" I said, "Oh, yeah, the black comic." He said, he's still alive. So we put Sammy in the courtroom. We put him in a black robe with a white wig, and he came through saying, "Order in the courtroom, here come the judge." Well, the next day everybody was talking about "Here come the judge" with Sammy Davis. That became a catchphrase. And by the way, we put that show on the air with Sammy doing "Here come the judge" blackouts. The next day, 2 days later, the Supreme Court came into the courtroom, and somebody in the back room said, "Here come the judge," and the courtroom laughed. It's the last laugh. I mean, the courtroom, the judges never got that much laugh until our recent adventures with Donald Trump. Now they're funny.
And there he is, Sammy Davis Jr. as that sort of judge character. But as I say, he would sometimes just like dance through the frame saying that.
Well, Sammy came. See, the way we taped Laugh It was all in bits and pieces. Sammy would come in and do 10 or 12 of those "Here Come the Judge" bits, and then we'd edit them into the show. So Laugh In was largely an accident, looking for a place to happen. One of the accidents was Sammy coming in with "Here Come the Judge."
Would you call Laugh In? Somebody says, I love those old variety shows. I guess it was a variety show, right?
No,
George?
no, it was not.
Thank you, because it seems to occupy another kind of weird space. But what other genre would you apply? What other label would you apply it to it?
I would develop a category called accident.
Okay.
That was an accident. I mean, one time, the second year, when Laughing was happening and getting, I said, I need to do something that's different and explosive. And Paul Keyes, one of the writers, said he was very friendly with Richard Nixon. He said, "I can get Richard Nixon." I said, "Can you get him for me too?" I didn't like him anyhow, but I said, so Richard Nixon came in and we got him to say, "Sock it to me." He said, "Sock it to me." No, Mr. Nixon, just smile. This comedy thing is new to me. Sock it to me. Yeah. So anyhow, we took him about 5 takes and we got Richard Nixon saying, "Sock it to me." We put that on the air and people could not believe Richard Nixon, who was a cube, I mean, he was so square. To him, come on, a hip comedy show was unheard of. But
it was good for Nixon. It was good for Nixon because for all the reasons you just mentioned. I mean, he was viewed as this stiff guy, really not liked by a lot of people. He was divisive. I mean, now he would blend in, but
he said it helped get him elected, and I've had to live with that.
Yeah. But that "Sock It to Me" was something else. You had people come on. They would sometimes be celebrities or, like, as you just said, Nixon, politician, and they would do that one thing, "Sock It to Me." How did that happen?
Well, it happened because nobody wanted to do the show. We had no money because the only way I got the show on the air was to do it for nothing. So we couldn't get people to do the show. So we would stop them in the hall coming back from the Johnny Carson show, and we'd ask them to do something. And none of them knew the show or wanted to do it, like John Wayne. John Wayne came on and he said, "I'm not going to do that show, those crazy people." That's what we put on the air. So we put on the air all of these big stars coming back from the Johnny Carson show saying they weren't going to do the show. And that's what helped us.
Go ahead, Kim.
Mr. Shlatter, I saw that you, and not to bring the mood down or anything, but I saw that you were the person that delivered the eulogy at Frank Sinatra's funeral. And I was reading that you call that the most difficult moment of your life. So I wanted to see if you could tell us about that and how it all came to be.
Well, Frank Sinatra was in my career periodically, moments, all the way from I was like 18 years old. And I got along with Frank Sinatra because I could make him laugh. He was feared by people for this image of this man. But so I made him laugh all the time. I would do terrible things to him, and then he would laugh. It was dangerous, but it was funny. So finally, when he was having the funeral, his wife called and wanted me to do a eulogy. I said, "Barbara, there's no way I'm going to do a eulogy." She said, "You must do it." So I said, "Well, okay, I'll do it." But I didn't want to have it. Eventually, they told me that I had to do this eulogy, and I was going to follow the bishop. Well, to do a eulogy for Frank Sinatra was in itself a challenge, but to follow a bishop. So I came out and I said, the bishop introduced me, and I said, "Thank you, Your Honor." She got a big, big laugh in the courtroom, right? And so from there on, I was the whole funeral became kind of a party, and Frank would have loved it. But my relationship with him was based upon me making him laugh. The bishop didn't laugh, but Frank did.
Well, it's just your career is amazing. You know, George, we talk a lot about laughing. I'm glad Kim brought up the Frank Sinatra thing. And you created the TV series Real People. And
there you go. There you go. Yes, I did. The shortest series in the history of television. It was another one of my adventures. And you understand, with laughing that huge, I could have sold them anything, right? And so I came in. I said, I have this idea to do this show that nothing makes sense, and everything was. There was a Moog synthesizer was used, synthetic sound, and anyway, and this group of young character people, and so we came on the air, and they sold it to Bristol Myers. We had 3 or 4 major sponsors saw the pilot, and they all loved it. Everybody loved Turn On, and so we went on the air, and a guy in Cleveland wanted to keep Peyton Place on the air. And so he started calling stations from New York all the way out. Every time he'd call a station and say, we can't let this happen. Nobody had seen the show, but they were canceling it, one station at a time. So by the time we got to California, it had been canceled. And I thought that was funny. Of course, I thought everything was funny. And so when we went on the air, I said, okay, great. We'll cancel it after the first show. They said, no, we're serious. It's off. And they said, not only that, but to get any of the money they owed me, I had to promise never to air it. So the show never aired until recently. 2 young scoundrels found in the archives the tapes of Turn On. And so now they've put that together, and I think Turn On's going to finally, 50 years later, appear. It was an adventure. It was upside-down television. It was
well, you also did, you know, George, I have to just say, you did the first ever all-black variety show with Red Fox and Pearl Bailey. Tell us about that. I mean, you know, you were really a groundbreaker, pal.
See, I was successful by breaking rules, not by obeying them. And we did a burlesque show with Danny Thomas, and we did an all-black show. We also did a show called The Shape of Things, which was all women. And that upset the network. They said, how can you do that without any men? I said, we can do that very well. So Shape of Things was there. And we did Children Are People. We did show with all children. See, what I miss now is a show does well, and then they say, let's do it again and again and again. I said, a show does well, let's do something different every week. And that really was, my success was kind of based on that. And an irreverence, an impudence, a lack of conformity, all of those things that are reasons to get fired today are the reasons why I was fired 50 years ago.
I got to know Joanne Worley a little bit through charity that we were both involved in. It was an abused women's shelter, and I would talk to her and see her. And I think I saw her again at the memorial service for Gary Owens, actually, who was part of your show. Yeah, well, you must have been there too, George. Yeah. I think.
Joanne Worley was an adventure. I mean, she was bigger than life, and she came in and would just kind of take over. So she had her own identity on the show. And Gary Owens was straight. He was a radio announcer. But I needed somebody to do straight introductions. And so we went to Gary Owens, and he stood there later that same evening. And Gary was a straight announcer that stood in a booth over at the side. That's the only thing he ever did, because he was doing a radio show early in the morning and couldn't be there when we taped. So Gary Owens was another one. Judy Carn was one. Of course, Goldie was magic. You know, Goldie came on and just lit up the screen, and she had a reputation of being this dizzy blonde. She was as bright as anybody I've ever worked with. But part of our chore was to break Judy, to make Goldie laugh. And Lily was another one. It was a time
of course, Lily.
Like right now. See, there's nothing on the air right now that really makes you laugh. Maybe the trial with the. I'm not supposed to. But if I was on the air today, I would be having such a ball with this trial that's going on. You know?
Well, the political stuff that you did, George, and we've got to wrap up here pretty quick, but the political stuff that you did was all part of an ongoing controversy in primetime television. Somehow, for example, the Smothers Brothers at the time did a lot of anti-war stuff on their show at CBS, and they were canceled. They got into big things with the network. You also did stuff I'd laugh in, but somehow you were able to navigate the controversies and encase them with enough comedy, I guess, maybe to get away with it.
Lying. lying helped. They would say, you can't do that, and I would promise. While I was negotiating with them on what I couldn't do, I was doing 3 things they also said I couldn't do. I think it was an adventure. I missed the adventure today. I mean, seriously. I mean, if I was on the air today, I would be having such a ball with Trump. I mean, it would just be a treasure trove because, you know, when you have the shots of him playing golf, you remember that? When he had diarrhea? Unbelievable. I would use that. And then all the things. I mean, Trump is the subject of great comedy. I wish they'd focus more on that. Well, we will. If he ever gets elected, we're going to have a great period for comedy.
They had a 4-year field day with him comedically. The Daily Show did a bunch of stuff. There was even something called the President Show, which was really funny.
We need it now. We need it now.
No, it's true. But George, your work is transformational. I mean, really, you did change show business and television in an extremely important way, and you launched so many people. We didn't even touch on, Tiny Tim, who appeared on your show, and Lily Tomlin's a career being introduced to America the way she was. You mentioned her in passing, but I mean, these were, truly great comedic figures and also performers,
I would love. I'm getting ready to do another shot. I'm seriously thinking about crawling out of my crypt and coming back for one more big shot because there's so much out there to make fun of, and nobody's laughing. I mean, the shows are all quiet. They're all dark. The comics are quiet, and they're either dirty or loud, not making any sense, But now, if we were on the air now, I would be having a ball. I would, just these hearings are enough. So,
yeah, well, you can, and George, you've created so much in your career. You could get a meeting anywhere and create whatever you want. I love that we got a couple of minutes with you. Here's the book, Still Laughing, A Life in Comedy, from the creator of Laugh-In, George Shlatter. It's truly an honor to have you on, my friend, and I look forward to...
The book was an adventure. They said, this isn't like a real bio, and I said, no, it's not at all. And so, selling the book, we published it ourselves because everybody was kind of doubtful whether or not this was really a book. What it is a series of very funny episodes in my long and shady career, but they all came together like a series of comedy blackouts. And I'm amazed that many people are buying it. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to getting it myself. I haven't yet picked it up, but I can't wait to get into it. I love this kind of thing.
I go door to door. I'll be over tomorrow with a copy.
My door is always open for George Shlatter. I promise you.
Signed copy using my real name.
Okay. Love spending time with you, my friend. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon. George Shlatter, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All the best. All the best.
The Mark Thompson Show.
How about that? That's a show business legend right there, George Shlatter. He is a show business legend.
Yep.
Gosh. One of the great thrills I had was when I came to Hollywood, I met Gary Owens because I was doing voiceover, did a lot of voiceover, and Gary and I would end up at the same kinds of auditions because he had that big voice like this,
Yeah.
And he was like also so much in show business, and he'd have stories mostly about music artists because he was a DJ, I guess, and coming up. But I knew him from Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, from George's show Laugh-In, like from beautiful downtown Burbank.
Yeah.
It's the Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. He sounded like that.
I forgot to tell Mr. Schlatter that if he does do another show, he needs to hire you for that role.
Oh, that's right. Well, I'm still very hireable.
Okay.
But when I met, I'm telling you, Gary Owens, he'd have all kinds of stories, and he'd always so gracious, Mark, I saw you last night on television. You're very good. And it was like, wow, Gary Owens paid me a compliment? Did I ever tell you the story about how I met Sonny and Cher? And then he would go on to this... Smokey Robinson and I were having lunch at the Hamburger Hamlet. It was really like those kind. I was like, my God, I just could sit here, order a drink, and listen to Gary Owens. So George Shlatter is that times a jillion, right? Because George Shlatter is filled with such great show business stories. I look forward to the next time we can have him on because he is, and I can't wait to get into this book. So
yeah, it's good.
Good stuff. Good booking. Loved it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, I am sadly having to say goodbye. I want to say what up to Pinky. Thank you for $1 a day. Yeah. Pink is
big shout out.
Big shout out. We are completely crowdfunded pretty much. And so we look to you. So Pinky, our lone funder today, but there are other ways to support us, as you know. You can go to themarkthompsonshow.com. There it is on the bottom of your screen, themarkthompsonshow.com. Click the Patreon or PayPal link to be part of our community that keeps us alive. So if you want to support the show, that's how to do it. Send us a little something every month, you know. If you give us what you spend on a Starbucks coffee just once a week, that's $20, and that really helps us so we can employ staff. And it's Albert's big salary that is
thank you.
Really setting us back. So Kim did block someone today.
Kim, how are you?
I blocked 2 people today.
I have to go back. I love it when she blocks people. Yes.
Come on here and try to stir up my people.
The after party live is coming up.
We'll do it live.
Yeah.
I'll write it and we'll do it
I'm Shadow
live.
Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Tomorrow, our big Friday show. Don't miss it.
Bye-bye.
Until then, bye-bye.